Donald Trump's Epstein problems are continuing with Pam Bondi's troubling testimony before Congress under oath. He's also going full bore on the enemies list prosecutions, which could be unlawful, and facing mixed setbacks in the courts. I'm going to do a full breakdown for you here. This is Ari Melber from MSNBC, my YouTube channel. You can subscribe for these updates. On the Epstein front, we have seen more and more problems pile up for Donald Trump. The most recent are the way that his attorney general seemed unable to answer or explain their investigative posture on the case, including Donald Trump's own aide, Lutnick, saying there was blackmail. Of course, Donald Trump's DOJ and Pam Bondi in this infamous memo said there was no blackmail, no credible evidence to pursue. Now the potentially credible evidence comes from inside the cabinet, unless they don't think the people Donald Trump has hired are credible at all. The second big scoop that came out, and it hasn't really gotten a ton of attention, I wanted to talk about a little bit, is a pretty exhaustive CBS accounting of just the issues around Epstein's death in a federal facility. That was under the Trump first term, the Barr Justice Department. And we've reported on this before. It is a big problem when an inmate dies in this way. Meaning even if the inmate was allowed to commit suicide or take their own life, that itself is a problem because the prison or jail's facility is supposed to prevent that. And second here, because there was so much intrigue around Jeffrey Epstein, he was, I think it's fair to say, one of the most high-profile detainees in the entire federal prison system, and definitely the most high-profile awaiting trial. That's the subset, smaller group of people who are in custody awaiting trial. And so there were questions here about whether he really did take his life, and the DOJ investigated that over time. So noting that problem doesn't mean that you just jump to speculating or making broad conclusions. It's possible that the failure was simply at the process level, that this was allowed to happen, he took his own life, and then there were other failures we've reported on, including what happened that night and basically a lack of oversight. They didn't have the right videos, and then they didn't do the investigation well afterward. But what this new report shows is they didn't even run fingerprints or DNA tests inside Epstein's cell. That hasn't always been known, although there have been major questions and apparent shortcomings in the internal DOJ probe. But if you wanted to get to the bottom of that, you would obviously run DNA and fingerprint samples throughout anything that could be touched or that night. Because if you only found, for example, fingerprints of people who were authorized to be there, Epstein and certain guards, that would be one answer at least. If you found even one print from someone who wasn't authorized to be inside that cell, another inmate, a different guard who wasn't supposed to be in there, a different person, you would immediately have a lead. And again, that doesn't mean there was full foul play, but it's something you'd want to know. And so there's been a lot of secrecy, including under the Trump administration, the first term when this happened, and whether or not the government could be trusted to investigate itself, and now the second term. So that's an update there, and I wanted to hit that because it's brand new, and now turn to what's going on with Donald Trump's enemies list. You can always tell a little bit about how bad things are in this era we're in, and again, I try to be fair and follow the evidence, but one shortcut is whether folks are still denying or lying about something, because Donald Trump has made a big show of saying that he wants to change things, that a lot of the way things were done were wrong. He's against the way government was run. He's against what he calls woke policies. But when you get out to an enemies list, Pam Bondi, who just had that difficult Epstein hearing, at her confirmation hearing, she said there will, quote, never be an enemies list. Donald Trump himself has tried to hide that he's calling in these prosecutions. And you say, okay, well, if he's tried to hide it and she says it's not happening, how do we know? If you follow this closely, you've probably seen some of these reports, including from the Wall Street Journal, of course, owned by Rupert Murdoch, part of the Fox News media empire in that same company. But they've reported that Donald Trump was trying to secretly order in 3 prosecutions by name: Comey, A.G. James, and Senator Schiff. And so when that message came public, a lot of people said at the time, why does it start with the name Pam? I even saw, to be honest, Stephen Colbert, when it first broke, was making jokes about why is he yelling Pam if this is a message for everyone? And well, sometimes the joke is on the right track. The Journal reporting that Trump was trying to privately message Pam Bondi, didn't mean for it to go public, that either he knows it looks bad or he may even, having learned about DOJ, figured out that if you're going to make the case that these people really are, quote, guilty and that the process just found evidence on them, then you might not want to admit that you're just agitating for indicting them regardless. And so this was supposed to be what they call a direct message, a DM. He accidentally posted it. People can debate whether these politicians should be highly skilled at their internet tech, or maybe they're not good at the phone, maybe they're too old. People can speculate on all that, but bottom line was the way he's using his messaging services, he accidentally sent it to the world. And Bondi, according to the Journal reporting, was very concerned about this. She called White House aides. They then did a follow-up message, their version of damage control. But that tells you something, which is even amidst all this bluster about how they're going to go after everybody, there's a lot of concern internally about whether this is okay, meaning will you get away with it? And second, will it work? If you telegraph very blatantly that this isn't about evidence, that these people didn't really commit crimes, that you just want to charge them like it's Russia or some tin pot dictatorship, well, admitting that doesn't help you, and then in court it may undercut the cases. And that brings us to an update on the Comey case. He was the first of that 3 names charged, and they're preparing what they call a selective or vindictive prosecution argument, a pretrial motion, which Comey and his lawyers, which include Patrick Fitzgerald, you might remember from he was a special prosecutor in the Bush administration all the way back to the Scooter Libby leak and a bunch of other stuff, but he's defending Comey among others, and they're going to argue here in court that the whole case should get tossed because it's vindictive prosecution and the evidence they have is from Trump himself. Then late in the week you had Attorney General James indicted. Again, this is not normal. You have the top official, law enforcement official in the state of New York being indicted very clearly because Donald Trump named her in what was supposed to be that secret order, and that he's upset about her prosecuting a civil case against him. That's not an indictment. It's not a case that could ever threaten jail time, but simply doing her job as oversight of Trump org in New York. And so now you have 2 out of 3. And the third would be Adam Schiff named. He's a senator. We saw the manhandling of Senator Padilla. We've seen other acts that are certainly extreme. And people may say, well, would he really go after a senator? The upper chamber and all that. And there's no sign that there's any limit here. They've already charged a member of Congress. That case is going forward. They charged the mayor of Newark and then dropped the case, but Trump doesn't seem to care if they have to drop it because he wants to make this show. And they're on a tear against their enemies list, and it's including other people who are lifelong conservative Republicans like John Bolton. Friday, the story broke by MSNBC reporters that the grand jury is moving forward, preparing the case to indict Bolton. That could be on classified documents or other issues. And if you follow politics closely, you might remember John Bolton was considered too conservative, too strongly neoconservative in his foreign policy views, among others, to get confirmed in the George W. Bush administration. He has been a lifelong neocon hawk. He worked for Donald Trump. He's had some criticisms after leaving that office, but for those who were sitting this out, Republicans, people in business, financial elites, you name it, sitting out the public resistance or accountability for this administration and saying, well, it'll play itself out, it's not going to hit them, or you have to just make it the next 3.5 years. Well, John Bolton's not, according to reporting, making it. He's had his home searched, and he is being pursued just like these other individuals. And so if you say, well, it's 2 out of 3 on the enemies list that he sent to Pam Bondi, it's his own former aide, John Bolton. There's reports that they're also investigating the second FBI director, the one that Trump literally named himself to replace James Comey, and that's Christopher Wray. We have all the makings of this tin pot dictatorship, and one of the key questions we're following is not only whether each of these cases will make it. I've given you some preview of why some of them have problems, but what is the kind of breaking point for the people in the United States who've underestimated this, who thought it would stop at a couple charges or stop at just people like Democrats or James Comey, who they view as a special case. Now that it hits potentially Republicans, even MAGA Republicans who work for Trump, and if they think it's going to stop there, again, you have to look at what he's said and look at the evidence. My point is not in recovering this whether you like or agree with everything that any politician says, but we are in unusual times that date back to patterns from the Nixon era, which America tried to correct, the McCarthy era, where you had government officials waiving lists and and saying this or that person is a communist or is a criminal, and then using the weight of the government to sort of ruin their career or worse in public, and then see what happened after that. And you could be a very strong supporter of Donald Trump's policies or Republican Party in general, but you have to start to look at the perversion of this. And if you look at the lessons from history, the McCarthy era, or what happened with Nixon, it didn't fare well even for the people who agreed with some of those politicians, because it was never enough. And that takes you back to the fundamentals. Do you want to live in a society, in a government system that has liberty and due process for all? Those are the sort of the fundamental Western barriers and limits, even if we say at times different countries, and including America, have failed that for certain people. But do you want to have that as the agreed upon baseline or not? Do you want to live in a society where Donald Trump secretly or publicly names enemies, and then they build a case around that? And if you live in that kind of society and they get away with it, it will become very clear very quickly that you don't have a democracy either, because you can use those tools against anyone who might rise up to become a member of the opposition party or a foe, an opposition candidate. We've seen that in Venezuela, we've seen that in Russia, we've seen that in places that might be left or right wing or other types of ideology. That's not the biggest thing. What's most significant, people living there, is basically that you don't have freedom of ideas, thought, or democratic discourse because of those crackdowns. And it sounds severe to the point where I try to address it with evidence, talk in my newscast and here on YouTube, talk to you guys about it directly, but describing something extreme doesn't make the narrator extreme, right? We have to figure out how to do this clearly and calmly, but also make sure people understand this is where we're at. I mentioned my YouTube channel, which is Ari Melber. You can subscribe on this video. You can put questions or comments in. I'm trying to hit some of those. But basically, that's where we're headed. And I also spoke with Ty Cobb this week, who, not the baseball player, but the former prosecutor and lawyer. He worked in the Trump White House in the first term. And he's warning that he views the military tests right now, the National Guard and others, as skirmishes to build the habit and launder the practice so that the president can then use the military to abuse power and make sure that if he hands off in 2029, it's to a Republican that he agrees with and no one else. And that's Ty Cobb's warning, that what you see in Chicago and other places, LA, DC, the pretext or the argument about keeping the public safety, he believes is just that, is a pretext, it's a fancy lawyer word for a lie or a gimmick, and that it's something else afoot. So that's sort of what we're up against. If you think about where we started with the questions about Epstein and Pam Bondi and the rule of law and whether we're going to get an honest accounting of things that affect the government, oversight, the bar, Justice Department, whether they really did investigate that situation fully or whether there was a lack of appetite or kind of a lack of interest in doing that if it was going to indict their own leadership. And that doesn't mean they're in on some conspiracy crime. It could just be the incompetence of letting an inmate pass, especially a high-profile one, and not wanting to catalog the problems with that. Or it could be worse, that they didn't really investigate a suspicious death, and that, well, again, we don't know, so I follow the evidence, but they didn't do the fingerprint searches to find out if somebody was in there. So you look at those questions, and that goes to government accountability in a single case. And now you look at what many experts say, and Trump appointees who refuse to do it say, is a perversion of the justice system to go after his enemies list. And so that's where we're at. As for what to do about it, I'll tell you, my favorite John Dewey quote is, "A problem well stated is a problem half solved." That may sound a little over-optimistic, but if you look at the arc of American history, the things that people see as big problems often tend to get a lot of the public attention, focus, and ultimately efforts to fix them. And so do we as a country understand what's happening as it's happening? It's only in the last few weeks that the enemies list has really started to lead to indictments, and they're on this tear. And if people understand that, and that it's, even by self-interest, just a threat to our own liberty and our own natural democratic order, then people can choose what to do about it. I try not to tell people what to think, nor do I think anybody needs that from me or anyone else per se, but as an attorney and a journalist, I'll tell you what we're finding and try to go from there. Again, you can like and subscribe at Ari Melber, and stay on it.